Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Jim Puckett. I'm the director of the Basel Action Network. Ben is the administrator of eStewards, and I'm going to be joined today with Salome Staley, our program manager, to introduce you to the new eStewards standard. This webinar is the first of a series of webinars we are committed to doing on eStewards and related issues. We're going to be doing them every other month, and you can go onto the eStewards website to find out the schedule of these. The next will be early December, and it'll be about the Basel Convention and an update on that treaty. So, we're coming live to you today from our office here in Pioneer Square, Seattle. This is our gang. We'd love it if you guys are ever in Seattle to come and pay us a visit. We're in the historic district. We are going to be taking questions at the end. And if you want to be formulating a question, you can use the chat mode way of doing that. Or at the end, you can raise your hand and ask it orally that way. So without further ado, I'm going to get going here and talk about a little bit about the agenda today, and then starting in on why we are doing 4.0. So the agenda today is going to be why 4.0, reminding people of the distinguishing features of eSteward certification. Then Salome is going to be talking about the major advancements of this standard, 4.0. I will be digging into more of the important changes, and then Salome again will pick up at the end to give the timeline and talk about our early bird special. So moving forward, I think the factors regarding why we decided to make a new version of our standard were many. The industry has changed. Certainly, waste is looking different than it did when we first started this some years ago. Our GPS tracking is proving to be a really good way to do due diligence outside of the standard, so we're able to make some modifications to perhaps relax some of the due diligence requirements based on our ability to track materials with GPS. The international laws have changed, and data security has become paramount. It's really become the most important issue on the minds of most major customers. And then I think the most important reason why we really felt we needed to change things is that over time, like a basement or a garage, the standard had accumulated a lot of stuff, and it became more complicated, long, difficult to read. And so we decided to simplify things and make it more readable and accessible. A lot of this was driven by our meetings that we have. We have a face-to-face meeting every year. And in 2017, it was decided that ISO 14001, while it's a wonderful management system, no longer integrates well with our standard, because we used to have them integrated together in the first versions of the standard. And it makes it more difficult to understand when it's integrated, and of course it makes it longer. And then our Leadership Council meeting in April of 2018 really stressed that our standard needs to be more easily understandable and accessible. So we're going to be streamlining it, was the mandate from that meeting. We also agreed at that meeting to adopt NAID as our data security section. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that and how we work with NAID. So as a result, we formed a drafting committee in the summer of 2018. It was made up of 3 environmental health and safety officers at 3 eStewards companies, and Salome was on the committee as well. So the mandate given to them was to make it more streamlined, less prescriptive, more practical, less documents required, really enhance security via NAID. We still are going to maintain, until NAID kicks in, the existing data security, which we feel is quite robust. But we wanted to go even further. And then with compliance, we wanted to add more meet into the extended producer responsibility schemes that so many recyclers are part of at the state level, and make some compliance requirements there, as well as incorporate the latest changes at the Basel Convention. And then finally, we wanted to maintain the random spot inspections and the GPS tracking that's been very successful. But the primary goal really was to create a simpler, streamlined standard while maintaining all rigor, one that best addresses the needs of customers large and small. So the first draft, the committee worked almost a whole year to create the first draft. It was received by the band staff in July, and we've been working on it from July to September, tweaking it up and discussing things, and getting it ready for this upcoming Monday, when we will be opening it up for the first comment period to eStewards Enterprises, our CBs, our processors, and that will begin on Monday. And you'll be able to go on, if you're an eSteward, and open up that and enter your comments in the windows on the online system. So just to remind some folks that might not be so familiar with eStewards, we have one slide here to stress the distinguishing features of eStewards versus other standards. And the first one is that we follow the Basel Convention trade rules very well, very closely, as well as the hazardous waste definitions. These are the rules of the road for any kind of transboundary movement, so it's very important to use those definitions and rules. It's a corporate standard, so rather than getting certifications facility by facility, our management system includes all the ancillary sites, the entire corporation. It requires ISO 14001. This is what we've always had, and we will maintain that, even though we are going to separate it out. We'll require NAID, as I mentioned. That will kick in, and the old data security language will sunset on the date July 1st, 2022. And then the performance verification program is unique to our certification. It involves truly unannounced inspections and random GPS tracking. Finally, our due diligence on materials of concern, follow those materials all the way to final disposition. That's very important. So I'm going to turn it over to Salome, and she's going to go through the major improvements.
Thank you. So my name is Salome Shteli. I'm the program manager, and I'm going to give you a quick update on the major improvements of the standard and why we're really excited about this new standard. So mostly this new standard is shorter and easier to read. This mostly because we removed the ISO 14001 language, but we kept the same structure and the same title, so it should keep this familiar structure. And also we moved examples and how-tos to the guidance document that's going to be released half a year after publication of the standard. And we combined related sections that used to be sometimes all over the text, so that should also make it easier to read. And it's mostly also quite a bit shorter. The new standard also has reduced prescriptiveness on and simplified procedures. So there's going to be less specific document requirements and more flexibility to satisfy requirements. For example, we removed the requirement to inventory and catalog every single small peripheral and circuit board. Also, we included the most comprehensive and up-to-date data security standard, NAID, and this should really help you to attract enterprise customers and should give your customers confidence that you're doing everything up to the highest standards in terms of data security. Because NAID really knows data, and their auditors really know data, and they really stay on top of the rapidly changing landscape of data security laws. This also might be really interesting to you. We have negotiated reduced fees for all eStewards certified recyclers, so you'll get some advantage there being eStewards certified with NAID fees. The new standard will also incorporate the latest Basel Convention amendments, the amendment on plastic. And this helps companies to remain in compliance with international law, which is appealing to multinational clients. Also, since we pulled out ISO 14001, the standards will now be available for free, which removes a burden to learn about the standards. And also, if your clients have questions about the standard, they can download it and read it and don't have to buy it anymore. So with no further ado, I'll hand it back over to Jim for the other important changes.
Yeah. So let's dig into it a little bit more. We've increased the number of definitions. Part of the way you can shorten the standard is not to repeat yourself over and over again and use definitions and when appropriate acronyms for those definitions throughout the standard. These are some of the new definitions. We have a materials of concern, which is the potentially problematic materials and hazardous e-waste combined together. So they make up a body known as MOCs, or materials of concern. The HEWs really reflect the Basel definitions. The PCMs are things we've added to that list. We've also defined tolling operations, and we're going to deal with tolling and allow it. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Life cycle perspective is important, just as the waste management hierarchy is important, and the precautionary principle as ways you make decisions internally. We've also created a new term known as qualified smaller components, which don't have to be inventoried. We can improve things and also enhance reuse by not having such burdens on recording serial numbers on all components. And stewardship is defined more broadly to include social, environmental, and data security. And then we're going to be talking about our stewardship management system. That is the system rather than an EMS. We're going to be calling it stewardship management. And of course, that reflects those three criteria of social, environmental, and privacy responsibility. So this is done to create less ambiguity and to reduce the redundancies throughout the standard. We are going to be changing our nomenclature with respect to recyclers. We're going to be, instead of in version 3.1, as you see at the top, where we had recycler being equal to processor, we are now going to make recycler a subset of processor. So we're going to be referring to eStewards processors, which do both ITAD, refurbishment, as well as recycling. And so the umbrella term will be processor, and that gives more clarity and is more in line with the established definitions at the global and national level and other fora. So that's something we all have to get used to. The scope and normative reference, we had no normative references in the first standard, although ISO was integrated. Now we're going to be referring, these normative references are talking about other binding standards that you have to abide by, but are not actually baked into the standard. And those are now two, ISO 14001 and the NAID AAA certification. So that makes things more concise, easier to read. Pulling out ISO really shortened things and made it less crazy. We had before italics and normal text trying to differentiate the different standards. We think this is an improvement, and we're still giving the comfort of having the same precise order as ISO 14001 to make up the structure of the standard. So we did have an environmental management system. We kept tacking things onto it, so now we're just going to call it the stewardship management system. It is all about health and safety in the workplace, environment, social criteria, data aspects, and it references the policy tools of life cycles perspective, precautionary principle, and waste management hierarchy. So this is more adapted to e-waste issues totally, more comprehensive than just the environment. So it's a better term. We are, in the first standard, we didn't have anything really that specifically required a demonstration of compliance with extended producer responsibility schemes like the state schemes in 20-some states. We want to make it very transparent. This is also a type of compliance issue, and we want to make sure that people can demonstrate their compliance to those schemes and provide stakeholders that are relevant, like the governments and the OEMs, with that data at any time. And this, of course, is to prevent the cheating on weights and that sort of thing we hear so much about. So we're going to relax the inventory requirements. As I mentioned, if you have a qualified small component in version 4.0, and these are like mice and RAM and power supplies, things that really stack up, and it's very arduous to go through each one, record the serial numbers. We're going to let people deal with those in lots, and we believe this will increase reuse by reducing the administrative burden that would otherwise just make people throw up their hands and say, well, let's just shred it. So this is why we've made that change. And tolling in the 3.1, it was unaddressed. And if you really dug into the standard and looked at the definitions, it was a bit ambiguous as to whether tolling was allowed or not. And tolling, what we refer to here is when a customer does not give you ownership of the material, but they retain ownership of it, and then they want it back all or in part at the end of your services. And that's a legitimate business model, and we respect that, but it does have a weak point in that it can be used to dodge certain requirements by having people just never give you ownership. You do the work, they take it back and do all the bad things that are possible to do with electronics, like export. So we're going to allow it, but with some conditions. So we've defined it, and the conditions are basically that you need to inform your customer via the contract of the requirements you are obliged to undertake with respect to export. And if any exports are discovered from that client, then the contract will need to be annulled. But it's kind of an honor system and a voluntary system that does have the teeth of the contract potentially being annulled. So that, we think, is a really good compromise and respects what a lot of people are doing in the field. So in our industrial hygiene program, we've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and added noise hazards. So that's one thing that's been added. We're going to monitor for that. But other things have been made less burdensome. For example, the frequency of annual air sampling can be reduced if there are no significant changes and no problems discovered. And we're doing that, of course, to reduce the enormous burden and cost of industrial hygiene programs while retaining sufficient rigor. And then the battery testing. This has been a minefield for us because we are committed not to having export of substandard batteries, which made it very challenging. And most OEMs, et cetera, recognize a pass-fail on batteries. But we, in the past, created our own tests, which rapidly became obsolete as manufacturers changed their batteries, and it was impossible to keep up. So what we've done is we made things a little more flexible. We still have the basic parameters of the pass-fail percentages based on capacity versus original capacity. That's in there, but you have much more flexibility about how to achieve that. And so that's the reason for that change, is to provide kind of a reality check on what's possible. With downstream accountability, the on-site audits had to be conducted every 2 years in 3.1. We're moving that to 3 years. If there's no major changes, this again reduces the burden and the cost, and we believe our GPS trackers and our unannounced inspections do help keep things in line. On-site audits, again, we're going to be asking people to check on financial instruments, the closure plan, and insurance. This was not required before and now will be required. Finally, the appendices, just to outline what they're going to look like, and they are part of the binding standard, but we removed a lot of the detail on actual requirements for different types of materials, what needs to be done with them, different fractions. That's going to be in Appendix A. The administrative rules and procedures and policies are going to be in Appendix B. The administrative rules and policies for certifying bodies and accreditation bodies has not been drafted as yet, but it will be after the standard is completed. We've hired Greg Swan to help us with that. A lot of you know Greg, who's been with our program for many years prior. And then finally, Appendix D is the place where we're housing the existing data security requirements, which will sunset as of July 2022. Putting the appendices like that makes it a lot easier to manage. So in 3.1, in the early days, we never had a proper guidance document. This is going to be happen, as Salome mentioned, 6 months after the published date of version 4.0. We will have a separate guidance document. It'll give you all the how-tos and different examples of how people meet the standard, how to implement it. It's not binding and not auditable, but is a great implementation aid. So that is definitely coming. So, passing it over back again to Salome. She'll take you through the timeline, and then we'll open it up to questions for you all.
So I'm first going to present you the standard revision process. So the first step is we received advice from our leadership council on the overarching direction we should take, which is mainly take out ISO 4001 and adopt or include NAID as a requirement. And then second step was to create a drafting committee. The third step was to create a draft. So the drafting committee met over the phone over nearly a year to create that draft. And then the draft is reviewed by the staff. That's what's happening currently, and then prepares for the 30-day period, which starts on Monday. And then once we get the comments back, we will look through that, the drafting committee, and decide which ones to incorporate, and then open it up for a public comment period. And then we will make final adjustments and submit it to our leadership council. And the leadership council then votes to recommend or not the adoption by the ban board. And the final step is the ban board votes on the final adoption. So in terms of dates, next Monday on October 21st, we'll start a 30-day comment period, which is open to Easters certified recyclers, to certifying bodies, Easters enterprises, and to ANAB. And the Easters staff in December will then decide on the integration of proposed changes and prepare a new draft. And January 6th, we'll start the second public comment period, which will be open to everyone. And then our date, we plan to publish the Easters standard version 4, February 25th. And right after that, we'll prepare trainings for auditors, so CB auditors and internal auditors within Easters certified recyclers, and finalize the guidance document. I'm quickly going to present the Easters Early Bird Special. This is really a good way for you to get to know the standard better. It's a 1-year reduced licensing fee by 30%, which also gives you the right to access to the first comment period, which is only open to Easters certified recyclers. It gives you access to EarthEye at preferred rates, and also allows you to apply to the Advanced Plus Scholarship, which is only accessible to Easters certified recyclers. How do you apply for that? So you can go to our website and either contact us there or fill out a form. And then we'll ask you to complete a revenue verification form, which allows us to determine your fees, from which we will deduct 30%. And then we'll ask you to make an earnest deposit of 30% of that reduced fee, and sign a short agreement stating that you have to become fully certified within 6 months of the release of version 4. And you can get a full refund if you cancel a contract by March 10th. So we plan to publish the standards on February 25th, which should give you a little more than 2 weeks to decide whether you would want to move along with that or not. So we'll open now up for the Q&A section. So please either raise your hand. There should be a small icon with a hand on the left or right side of your application, or you can also send us a question via the chat. Okay. If you raise your hand, I will unmute you, and then you can speak up. Yes. Okay, I will open it up for John Fraser.
Okay, I say I'm unmuted. Okay, first question. All right, I'm honored. When do you expect, Greg, to get a draft of Appendix C? Just given our role in this whole program, Appendix C is going to be of great interest, and you know, often we're quoting existing clients for new cycles sort of well in advance of the audit happening, so we can schedule things and so on. So we'd want lots of lead time to know whether or not you know, our quote for, if we should be quoting to 3.1 or 4, and how the quote might change, and so on.
We will give you that information in 3 weeks. So we need 3 weeks to go over that annex and then send you that information.
Oh, that's soon. Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you.
I will now unmute Tina Gardner.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to just have a better clarity on the sequence of dates that are to occur. If the standard is being released in February, one of the slides indicated there should be training available to audit personnel in March or April. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, of course, we'll have the time required for our certification bodies to transition through the accreditation process. So I'm just trying to see how that 6-month early bird is. We're going to be able to adequately prepare and be ready so they can meet that 6-month. That's the only thing I'm trying to understand with all these key dates.
So the way the contract is drafted is they have to make demonstrable best efforts to be certified within 6 months. We understand that it can be difficult and that other events might make it not possible.
Okay. So they might be prepared, but if based on how training falls out, et cetera, it could go longer if need be.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And realize also that if you have a pretty complicated or lengthy question, we're happy for you to send it to Salome or myself by email, and we'll get back to you for sure. Any more?
I don't see any other questions.
Any other questions about anything?
Tina.
Tina again?
Tina.
Yes, thank you. I'm back. Again, I'm trying to capture all of this and don't have the presentation in front of me. The anticipated transition period for moving to the V4, what are the key dates and all of that? Do you have that defined yet?
Yes, it's going to be 18 months.
So in 18 months, the previous version 3 is not going to be valid. Everything will be moved to the V4 within 18 months. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And Tina, we can get on the phone with you and work through all the details here, because you might have some insights that could help us refine our timeline. So look forward to doing that.
So we got a written question by Tracy Phillips. Whether it's 18 months off publication, yes, it will be 18 months after publication that we will, that the new standard, the old standard will sunset. And February 25th is when the standard will be published.
Okay, is there any more questions? Might have one more here. John is?
John?
Yeah, it's John again. Back to my favorite Appendix C. So the comment period for the standards opening next week, is Appendix C subject to comment as well? And will that be, I suppose, in the second comment period in coming up?
Yeah.
Not yet. Second comment period, not yet. We need to finalize that section first.
But it is subject to comment as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
excellent, okay.
Anybody else?
Tina? Yeah.
Okay, so is that everyone?
Yeah, I just did a chat. I don't have any more questions, but
We lost her.
Yeah.
Tina, we'll be in touch with you, and we'll look at your chat. I think, is there anybody else?
Some people press the question mark.
Oh, instead of the...
Yeah.
Oh.
So we got a question from Shraddha Savant. Sorry if I pronounced wrongly your name. What the fees are for NAID for the Easter recyclers? That depends on your facility. That's something that you would have to talk to NAID, and then we can figure out your fees for that. Now we have a question by Dennis Fritzer. Does the corporate membership cover international facilities?
Do you want me to do this?
Okay.
So the way the corporate membership works is country by country. So, for example, within the U.S., you'll need to get all your facilities certified. If you go to Brazil, that's done separately. You'll need to have all your Brazilian facilities certified. So it's done country by country. So if you don't want to have Brazil certified, that's possible as well. But once you start up in a country, you have to have the whole corporate infrastructure in that country under the management system and certified.
Then we have a question by David Garrett. Are there any NAID webinars on training planned for how to comply? And yes, we have such webinars planned that we will give, or that NAID will give, or we will give together with NAID. We're working on those currently. Read that all of them. Just want to say hi.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. If for some weird reason we left you out, send it in by email. We will endeavor also to post this webinar, including all the questions. So you'll have a recording of it, and you'll be able to go back through the slides and look at them. We will post that as of 1 day, 2 days? 1 day. So it'll be up as soon as we get it up there, maybe today or tomorrow, for you to study. And again, call us or write us any questions, concerns you might have. But we're very excited about this new version 4.0. We'd love a lot of newcomers to take a second look and people to take advantage of this early bird opportunity. So without further ado, I want to thank you all to our first webinar, and we will be announcing the second one in a few weeks and give you a date for that. Take care.
Bye.